When I was at the International Conference on Computational Creativity, and somebody in passing said, I mean, this is 2015, right? This is well before people had kind of awareness of this stuff. It was only this tiny research community that was really seriously thinking about creative machines. And somebody in passing said, and of course, a machine can be a co-creative partner. It was in passing. It was like, they throw it out. My whole world came together in an instant. It's like, oh my goodness, I can build systems that would help me write songs, which I've been struggling with for 3 years. And now I see exactly how to do it, right? It's about it helping me be creative. And I think it can be a company. It was all at once. And I got so excited. And I was thinking, oh God, I just hope that this is not one of those false moments.
I'm thrilled to be speaking with Dr. Maya Ackerman, a world-renowned researcher in generative AI and CEO and co-founder of Wave AI. A pioneer in the space, Maya has been researching Gen AI models for text, music, and art since 2014. She was an early advocate for human-centered Gen AI and brought awareness to the power of AI to profoundly elevate human creativity. She has over 50 peer-reviewed research publications, and her research has been cited in over 1,200 publications. She's been named a Woman of Influence by the Silicon Valley Business Journal, and she's spoken in interviews on NBC News, NPR, and international television stations and stages all across the globe. She earned her PhD from the University of Waterloo. She's held postdoc fellowships at Caltech and UC San Diego, and she sits on the faculty of the Computer Science and Engineering Department at Santa Clara University. Maya is also a singer, composer, and music producer. Maya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Generative AI is indisputably the hot topic of the moment. Having been in the field for a decade, what do you like to share with people who don't know much about AI or are just discovering it for themselves now?
That's a great question. It's been really amazing watching the field go from a very, very niche research field developed under the name computational creativity and creative AI into what it is today. And it really went through quite a transformation in the process. Generative AI is inherently a very, very creative form of computing. It's imaginative, it's wild, it's wrong a lot. It was literally developed under the name computational creativity. So as researchers, we weren't expecting it to be a source of truth. We weren't thinking about it as a chatbot. And watching sort of some of the most successful commercial applications and the way public consciousness has been viewing it as the machine that should know it all. And if it's not, then it's lying to us. If it's not, then it's hurting us. I think it's somewhat of a fundamental misunderstanding of what the technology is geared for. And I believe that by sort of recognizing where it came from, we can be more realistic with our expectations, but also apply it in ways that are ultimately more positive and less dangerous.
Thank you for that little background. Let's go back in history, in time a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about when you were a kid. When we talked the first time, you shared that your family had moved from the USSR to Israel and then to Canada, and that you also started playing piano at an early age. When you think back to yourself as a child, how did your interests in music and technology start to form?
Yeah, I think who we are really gets formed pretty early on, whether we sort of give tribute to it or not. When we moved from the USSR to Israel, you couldn't take money. I mean, the ruble was worthless almost. And so one of the things that my family did is we bought a piano, and it ended up in our apartment in Israel. And so I'm this 7-year-old girl, and suddenly I can have regular piano lessons. And I just kind of fell in love with it really, really hard. I had these intense, amazing teachers who were like, you have to practice at least an hour every day. I was like, okay. So I did that, kind of serenading the whole neighborhood, which, got less terrible as I learned how to play. And then it was gone out of my life completely when we moved to Canada and my parents couldn't afford an instrument the entire time that I lived with them. And it was just gone. It's this amazing thing that I had in my life that I loved so much disappeared forever. I think it kind of taught me how precious it is to have the opportunity to make music and how important it is to make tools accessible. So that sort of re-woke up in my life much later in my late 20s when I realized that I can just choose to learn music at any point. And I relearned piano and learned how to sing opera, which was incredibly fortunate to have the right teacher around. Yeah, it's. I think it's absolutely the reason that I ended up co-founding Wave AI much later in life.
Yeah, and beyond playing piano and singing opera, you're also a songwriter. And you started Wave AI to help you write songs. How was it co-founding your own business and having you as kind of the first user?
So for 3 years, it was really kind of the prequel to Wave AI. In 2015, I came up with the idea while attending the International Conference on Computational Creativity. I've been struggling to write my own songs for about 3 years. What happened to me is actually very normal. Now I know that it's normal. I would write the kind of music I heard as a kid. That's what gets ingrained deep in the brain. And so I didn't like it. That's not what I wanted to write, but that's what was coming out of me. And I needed something to help me break out of that and see sort of other ways, in particular for vocal melodies, other ways to sing my lyrics. And we built a system that would take lyrics and find different ways to sing them. And suddenly I could break out of it. It worked so quickly. It worked so well as far as helping my creative process. Not that it worked well in writing the songs instead of me. That was never the goal of anything that we do. But it worked well in helping me be a lot more creative. To such an extent, I was so much happier. I'm not even saying that my songs were so much better, but I was so much happier with my process, right? And that's a key distinction. As a musician, I keep looking back at what I used to write, and I'm unsatisfied with all of it, right? But definitely the progression, I kept getting better and better because of the tools we were able to build. And eventually, by the time that, I wrote my later set of songs, I haven't published them yet. And that was just like 2 years ago, I wrote a batch of songs. I'm much happier with what I'm writing now. But these tools were such a central part in developing my creative process. And that's what I love hearing from our users as well, that it's helped them become more creative, because it really should be all about the person. And if it's not, then it's kind of sad.
Mm. Yeah. If you talk to kind of writing professors or composition professors, a lot of the old adage is write what you know, right? But I'm wondering how Wave AI actually maybe adds on to that adage. What do you think?
I think a lot of the ways that we think about music has to do with what tools are available to us. And human beings are kind of one of our biggest weaknesses creatively. We have a lot of incredible strengths over machines, but one of our weaknesses is that we tend to be quite repetitive. We tend to come up with kind of the same type of lyrics, the same type of melodies, the same type of vibe. And that's what we call our style, which is all nice and good if you're very happy with that style and, and you're kind of getting where you want to be. But to try to move that needle on what my style is, to expand it, to go somewhere else, can be really difficult. And one of the biggest strengths of machines, if you build them right, if you're really intentional about it, and that they are incredible. They can be incredible in exploring the creative space of possibilities. And they're not at all limited to one style or one way of doing things. And so it's kind of like this very creative, very out-of-the-box collaborator that can go anywhere, that can kind of help you get there. And they don't know our stories. The machines don't know our feelings. The machines are not there to help us connect with other human beings. That's all us. But to have something to kind of like help spark our own creativity, help us go to a new place, can be such a big deal in the creative process.
I'm even seeing like a muse come to mind. Like maybe this is our, it's our AI muse in a way. And I think it's so interesting that, you know, there's the songs that we write, but there's also the feelings we have about the songs or stories we write that matters, right? The musical AI products that you have invented have now been used by millions of musicians across the globe. Congrats. What are your hopes for the creative people who use AI?
I think creative people who find systems that work for them end up going to really interesting places. Some of my best friends are artists who use these tools. I mean, one of my favorite examples really is James Morgan, who is a professor at San Jose State University. And not only does he use kind of visual AI systems in the most fascinating way I've ever seen, but also we built an early system of an early version of our technology for him because he wanted to write an Italian aria. But he's not a songwriter. So he's such a creative person. He was actually able to, without any songwriting experience, to use our tools to write an Italian aria, not knowing how to write songs and not knowing Italian. But it really does speak to not only the quality of the system that we gave him, but it really speaks to what an artist is able to do with tools, what an inherently creative person can do when you give them the kind of tools that they actually want. And that's really when it becomes about taking artists to... That's the most beautiful applications of AI. You know, when you pair it with a really creative person and you give them the kind of system that lets them fly, that doesn't constrain them.
I love it. A system that lets them fly. You mentioned earlier that you started singing opera. I believe it was while you were getting your PhD and you met the right teacher. What drew you to opera as an art form?
I know that you're also an opera singer, so I love having that in common with you. I have to say, your voice is so beautiful. Anyways.
Thank you.
So in short of my story, I was about 27 years old. And in my early experiences when I was in Israel, I actually had a chance to sing on national television. It's actually kind of a complicated story on how that happened. So I had a pretty good voice as a little girl, but I haven't sang in like 15 years approximately at that point. So I wasn't very good anymore, which is something I didn't realize, how much you could lose skills. And so, you know, I came to this opera singer for lessons and we were really starting from scratch. And there's a lot of, I think my journey, you know, it has a lot of humility, kind of admitting that I wasn't good at something and putting in the time and effort to learn, to become good at it. And I really was surprised how quickly I got better. And within 9 months, so at the 9 months mark, I started performing, really starting off not being good at all. Like I'm just very transparently. And I never expected to go into opera. I really wanted help just singing kind of regular pop music. But my teacher really inspired me with her voice. She would demo stuff and she would tell me like a little bit about her life and sing a little bit of opera. And it's like, wow, it's the most beautiful thing I heard in my whole life. And so I tried to do it. And I was kind of amazed that I had this voice inside of me that just needed to be developed. Everybody does. Everybody can sing opera. I was training. I just fell in love with it. I practiced every day for at least an hour, just like with the piano as a little kid. And it led to a lot of dissonance in my life, ironically, because I had this computer science path and now the music path. So it was really important to me. And I couldn't see at all how to combine it took me like another 5 years, more or less, to discover how they fit together in my life.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like you had an incredible teacher. You have a gorgeous voice. I'd love to hear a little bit more about this rendition of Ave Maria, which was actually included in a movie How did that happen and how did that come to be?
That was kind of magical. I was already running the company, so I was less focused on my own art. I kind of periodically go through little periods where I make music again. But it was also pretty early in the pandemic. So, the world was shut down and everything was kind of sad and scary. And then I get this email from people making this movie called Death in Texas. And they were interested in using my song in a very specific scene in the movie. And we made it happen. And it was just really, really beautiful. I didn't do any kind of promotion. I didn't put it out there. Well, the only thing I did do is that this is a song that I uploaded on YouTube years before something happened to it. So that was really special.
Let's take a moment to reflect on this question. What creative projects have you put out into the world with no expectation of anything in return? Outside of hosting this podcast, I partner with leaders in the workplace to turn professional challenges into leadership successes and career progression. I love working with executive leaders, aspiring C-suite professionals, and of course, ampersands. If any of this sounds interesting to you, reach out to me at jessicawan.com. That's JESSICAWAN.com. Now, back to the show. You've appeared on many top stages, including at the United Nations, IBM Research, and at Microsoft. What is it like being up there on the stage, and what's something you've learned about yourself as a speaker?
That is your questions are so good. I'm sometimes more comfortable on stage than off of it, to be honest. I really feel very at ease. With a good audience, with sort of, when the pieces fall into place, it's very, very special. I think it's something I'm incredibly grateful to have in my life, that whether it's to perform as a musician, which I haven't done recently, but there was a time in my life when I did that a lot, or have the opportunity to speak in front of an audience, to share my thoughts, to share my experiences. I think it's something that I don't take for granted. I think nobody should take something like that for granted. And I think what I've sort of learned is how important it is to be authentic in these contexts, whether you're performing someone else's words through a song, or sharing your own experiences, or sharing academic research. I think at the end of the day, people want to see a real human being, and they want authentic human truth. And so I try to bring what I've learned from being a performer to bring it authentically into kind of academic settings, and whenever I have a chance to be on stage.
Yeah, I see a lot of humility, and I really appreciate you sharing. Sometimes there is, it's just a different experience to be on a stage with an audience of many, and maybe sometimes that's even less pressure than, a one-on-one face-to-face interaction with somebody that, you really respect or revere, or might be a little frightened of. So Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's very different. I think I'm different on stage than I'm one-on-one. I think one-on-one, I'm very attuned to the other human being, and it's really about the relationship one-on-one. And I think that's how it should be. That's how I want it to be. Even in small group settings, it's about the other people. When I'm on stage, I'm just me, right? I still take in the audience. The connection with the audience is critical, but it's different. It's you have the spotlight when you're on stage. You're allowed to be you in a way that's very different from any other context. Maybe this is just how I see the world, but that's my experience.
Yeah. When you think of all of the many things that you do, what do you think ties together these things? What's the through line?
I think you're helping me discover this through line. In reality, in a very kind of simple way, my life came together, right? The music and the computing ended up getting married in my mid-30s. It took a moment. I think at a certain point in my career and life, I just sort of realized that you bring yourself into anything in your life, and you don't have to stay in any kind of pre-made lanes, right? You can kind of form your own career and your own life in a way that makes sense based on who you are authentically as a person. And I've been learning also kind of more recently how it's kind of who I am, and my career is as much about my weaknesses as about my strengths. And it's not about being perfect in everything and sort of achieving as much as possible. It's really about living life authentically and connecting with human beings in an authentic way, and trying to bring value in a way that I think is sort of profound, not just optimizing for money, not optimizing for prestige, but really trying to optimize for not even optimize, just try to, just like you would if you're living in a small community of 150 people, you would want to make sure that whatever you do through your work actually helps your village. I think that's the right attitude for me, for my work in this, more complicated world that we live in today.
Yeah. You talk about integration of your many passions and pursuits as something that you were seeking for a while and didn't have for a while. And now you have that, or at least I think you have that. And I'm curious if there were kind of milestones along the way, or kind of was there a moment where you felt like, these things are now coming together?
I really appreciate you asking that. There was a moment. So you're absolutely right. I was seeking for a long time, and I always felt that I wanted a fulfilling career. I knew it was important to me. I honestly believe that there are ways to live life without emphasis on your career, focusing on other things. But for me, for whatever reason, I knew for me that was important. And I searched for a long time, even within computer science, before I kind of introduced music to it. There were like various pivot and permutations. I really was searching for the right fit for who I am. And I was very frustrated that the music and the computing were kind of separate, and I actually believed that they couldn't be combined, but I wasn't sure how to navigate this kind of like dual, not exactly dual career, but kind of like dual parallel lives. I wasn't sure how to do this properly. And so when I was at the International Conference on Computational Creativity, and somebody in passing said, this is 2015, right? This is well before people had kind of awareness of this stuff. It was only this tiny research community that was really seriously thinking about creative machines. And somebody in passing said, and of course, a machine can be a co-creative partner. It was in passing. It was like they threw it out. My whole world came together in an instance. It's like, oh my goodness, I can build systems that would help me write songs, which I've been struggling with for 3 years. And now I see exactly how to do it, right? It's about it helping me be creative. And I think it can be a company. It was all at once. And I got so excited. And I was thinking, oh God, I just hope that this is not one of those false moments. You know, those false moments of excitement. You're like, yes, I got it. And you wake up the next morning, it's like, oh, what was I thinking, right? So this happens to me too, right? I'm like, please let this be one of the real ones, because I feel that it's so big. And it has led the next 10 years of my life.
Wow. I just got chills. And yes, I empathize with those 2 a.m. awake. Like, I just have the most amazing idea. And then you write it down and wake up and it's kind of chicken scratch. And you're like, what was I thinking? But this one's real. It's real. What advice do you have for people who are trying to connect 2 or more different worlds?
I think it takes a specific kind of person to even live across 2 worlds, right, to begin with. And I think it speaks to a certain, dare I say, like search for truth, a search for authenticity, the fact that you find yourself in 2 worlds. I think my only piece of advice would be to just trust yourself. If you trusted yourself enough to be brave enough to have more than one path, you kind of gotta, and it won't necessarily happen overnight, but to ultimately have that faith, the faith and the trust that you will find the right way, the unique way that works for you, and that it's okay to do things differently and not kind of follow a well-trodden path. Because when you combine 2 very disparate things, I think it's almost always in a unique, special way.
Yeah. Trusting yourself and leaning into authenticity. That's what I'm hearing. Through these interviews, we are co-creating the Ampersand Manifesto, Principles for Leading a Multi-Passionate Life. What would you add to the manifesto?
I think what I like most about it is that it's I guess, the authenticity about it. So we don't have to limit ourselves to one passion, right? We don't have to live life by someone else's book. And I guess the goal of it all is to live more authentically. That's what it keeps coming back for me. And I think inside of all of us, there is potential for fulfilled lives that look very different, right? I'm somehow like aware inside of myself that there's like 30 different career paths I could have done that would have been like amazing. And I don't have any desire to do 30 yet. That's, time constraints and stuff. And it's this balance of being a person that's pulled into multiple directions and still have some space in life for interpersonal relationships and, for doing the laundry. And that can be really difficult. But I think we deserve it as human beings to do more than one thing if that's what our hearts call for.
I love that. Oh, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, Maya. Folks, you can learn more about Dr. Maya Ackerman at maya-ackerman.com or find her on LinkedIn. And if you are a songwriter, definitely check out Wave AI. We'll link to these in the show notes.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
If you liked this show, hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow Ampersands. And if you're enjoying our show, please consider leaving a rating or a short review so that more people can find out about the show. I had a chance to listen back on my interview with Maya, and I wanted to share a few key takeaways. 1. Is AI the new creative partner? Gen AI has been the hot topic of the last few years, but a lot of people I talk to don't really understand how to use it effectively beyond playing around with it or feeling like they should try it out. Maya offers a new way of thinking about this. Throughout time, songs have been written between collaborators, typically a lyricist and a composer. Maybe that model shifts a bit now with new technology, with AI providing expansiveness to creators, not really totally replacing a human, but bringing a new perspective that an AI tool is uniquely qualified to provide. 2. The benefit of staying observant. I loved the story of Maya's worlds coming together in an instant when she heard a comment in passing at a conference. We all have these serendipitous moments in our lives when a bunch of things that we couldn't have predicted send us down a new path. And to allow for that to happen, we need to put ourselves in new places and to observe and to listen. 3, the many lives we could have lived. I really resonated with Maya sharing that she could have found fulfillment down a number of different paths. I think this is quite defining as an ampersand and maybe as a human being. I myself could have seen careers in architecture, interior design, movie making, and conducting. Or maybe these are yet to come. It reminded me a lot of the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, where we could have been many, many things. And yet, we are in the reality we've created for ourselves today. And we have the agency to change that.
I think you're helping me discover this for mine.